Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video I am continuing my deeper dive through the Player's Options Combat and Tactics for AD&D 2nd Edition. I'm going to be taking a look specifically at Chapter 2, or at least portions of Chapter 2. And I just want to put out a couple of things. These are players' options, right? So you do not have to include these in your game. You don't need these in order to effectively run AD&D 2nd Edition. And so, bearing that in mind, I'm not discarding the entire thing, because what you can do is you can still glean some ideas out of here as to how to add additional layers to your AD&D 2nd Edition without going the full implementation route of these optional rules. So, sometimes you can just take the idea of something and then just, wing it through, the DM's power, and just do it in a descriptive way without actually getting bogged down in any kind of mechanics for it. So I will kind of flesh out that idea with a little bit more detail as I start doing the flip through of chapter 2. And again, I'm not going to cover every single little detail of chapter 2. Just hit on the things that pop out to me, as I'm going through it. So, as always, a very unscripted and unchained view of these things. And if you're not aware, the unscripted part is that I'm not sitting here and following some kind of a detailed list of things that I'm going to say. And Unchained is coming from the fact that if I come across something I disagree with or I don't like, I'm going to come straight out and say it. I don't agree with this, and I wouldn't use this for whatever reason. I'll try to give you a detail beyond just saying I don't like this and then move on. I'm going to tell you why I don't like it, or how I think it should be done. And you can take my advice, take it or leave it. It's entirely up to you. So without further ado, let's jump right into taking a look at chapter 2. So chapter 2 begins. All right, so even the greenest recruits have more options in combat than to stand in one place and swing at opponents over and over again. I completely agree with that. This chapter covers tactics, options, and styles of fighting that are available to anyone on the battlefield. Battles aren't just a matter of who gets the lucky rolls now. Smart characters can make their own luck by using sound tactics and common sense in the thick of a fight. There are 5 parts to this chapter. The first is battle tactics. It covers common tactics for fighting a battle, including shield walls, spiked hedges, and mounted charges. Attack options discuss different ways to use a character's attack to achieve specific results. Fighting styles, dueling, and brawling discuss various tactics of personal combat and how characters can employ them to their advantage. Does this belong in my campaign? Battle Tactics relies heavily on the player option combat system presented in Chapter 1. Although the basic concepts are still sound, you won't see much game benefit to these strategies unless you are resolving battles with the combat system. That's where I disagree, right? If it is so dependent on the combat system from Chapter 1, and you're not exactly looking to make it make your gaming experience more like a skirmish game, like Chapter 1 really does make it seem, then this is basically telling you that don't use chapter 2 unless you're using chapter 1. And there I totally disagree with. You can certainly take elements of this and not gamify it, but you can narrate it, or your players can role play it, and you can still give the same benefits of it if they narrate it properly, and provided they were successful or whatever. You can make various adjustments to what is going on beyond just standing in front of, standing in one place and swinging at your opponents. So let's go to where they start talking about. So combat options, we're going to go into the battle tactics, and you have a shield wall. In chapter 1, we discover how figures can crowd together in close order, placing 2 man-sized creatures in a single space. If the creatures stay along an even line in close order, they can form a shield wall by overlapping their shields. The shields must be medium or kite shields. Fighting with the shield wall has several benefits. Versus missile weapons, all members of a shield wall and allies behind are considered to be covered behind 50% cover. All right, so it's -4 AC bonus. Versus missile fire, shield walls block lines of fire indoors or underground. So in dungeon settings, all allies behind the wall can't be targeted by hostile missile fire. The creatures actually form the shield wall can still be struck, however. Versus melee. Since members of the shield wall are in close order, shield walls allow them to concentrate their fighting power. They are also good for controlling enemy movement, especially in narrow areas such as dungeon corridors. Because the shields overlap, all members of the wall gain a -1 bonus to their armor class. Creatures forming a shield wall must be the same size or the wall without penalty, but if he fights with his battle axe, type size M, he suffers a -2 penalty to his attack rolls because he is too close to his allies. All right, so let me reread that because that was a little. Creatures forming a shield wall must be of the same size or the wall without penalty. That makes no sense. That's just. I know what they're trying to say, but it's just written bad. But if he fights with his battle axe, type S, size M, he suffers a -2 penalty to his attack rolls because he is so close to his allies. This is what they're basically saying. If you're in a shield wall and you're swinging a two-handed weapon, you are going to suffer a -2 penalty to your attack roll because you are literally right next to somebody within that shield wall. So it's a much easier way of saying what they're trying to say here. Another excellent tactic for shield walls is to place long-range polearm wielders immediately behind shield wall. Since the polearms can reach over the shield line, enemies can be exposed to several attacks at once when they close to the melee range. Using a polearm over the friend creates a -2 penalty to attack rolls, however. So, and you can see the graphic here, and the graphic actually explains it really well, right? So the very dark white line, an arrow, is the first line. So that's their pikes. The second one with the dashes is the second rank, and the third is the very fine dotted lines, and that's the third rank, right? So if someone is coming in and charging at this first guy on the top portion, right? First rank. That person is going to have to deal with the attack of the first line, then the second line, then the third line before he actually reaches the guy in the first line. All right, so there will be 3 attacks that he will have to lunge through before he even gets to the line. So it really does stack up the number of attacks that the person is going to face. Now, these subsequent lines, though, are going to have minuses to their attack. All right, using a polearm over the friend creates a -2 penalty. So this first one is going to be base. Second one is going to be a -2 to their attack roll, and the third line a -2 to their attack roll. All right, and you might want to even change this a little bit and say 0, -1, -2 if you want to kind of nuance that a little bit more. That's entirely up to you. So because it doesn't make as much sense to me that the second rank and the third rank have the same minus penalty, but fine. Spear or pike hedges, are extremely effective against creatures trying to close in for melee. Swiss pike formations could defeat the most powerful mounted charges and could cut through many foot troops as well. Hedges don't have to be formed in close order, but they are more effective if they are. Hedges can be made doubly dangerous by adding an extra rank of spearmen or pikemen to create a defense in depth against any enemy approach. To form a spear hedge, characters need to stand side by side in even line, and the second rank can form up behind the first rank and attack over the front with the first rank at a -2 attack. If the polearms are ranged only weapon, such as a pike, then the penalty does not apply. If the troops are equipped with ranged 3 weapons, the third rank can be added behind the second rank. Spear hedges are most effective when all characters choose the guard action, since any foe foolish enough to approach could be subjected to as many as 6 attacks before he could strike back. Spear hedges can only make half moves and remain together. Like shield walls, spear hedges can be extremely effective in limited areas where opponents can't flank them. All right, so again, so not the shield wall, but just a layering of spears. You have the differences here, and they show the pike hedge here, just to give you that example. Mounted charges, I'm not going to go into too much detail with that. Archery from, because everybody or most people familiar with D&D already know about the charge mechanics and such. You're able to close in. If you charge in, you could take double damage. If they're setting their spears and hitting you, they will dish out a whole lot of damage, especially if it hits the horse or the horseman. In either case, and they also get a benefit to hitting with a wedge spear. So it makes it easier for them to hit as well. So it's a cool mechanic if done, but you're usually not going to use that in a dungeon setting. Obviously, you're using that out on the field, and quite a lot of these are dealing with true battlefield combat. Archery from horseback, very effective against foot troops without missile weapons. If the character on foot has a weapon to reply to the horse's archer fire, it's a different story. Weapons suitable for use while mounted include short bows, composite short bows, hand crossbows, light crossbows, and size S firearms. All right, the archer remains still, takes no movement action. His rate of fire and range modifiers are unaffected by his mount. If he rides at half the rate of fire is reduced by 1 category, and he suffers a -2 penalty to his attack rolls. If his mount takes a full move, his rate of fire is reduced as above, and he suffers a -4 penalty to attack rolls. These penalties can be reduced by expertise in mounted archery. Refer to Chapter 4 for more information. Yeah, which I was going to mention before I got there, right? So you can take secondary combat skills that allow you to fight better from horseback. So attack options. So now we're getting into melee attack options, right? So you can block or for firing or for either missile or melee, you can do a called shot. You can disarm, you can grab, you can overbear, you can pin, you can pull or trip, you can sap somebody, you can shield punch somebody, you can shield rush somebody, you can do an unarmed attack, or you can unhorse a mounted opponent. And then there are special maneuvers. And so they go through many of the attack options described below use a game mechanic known as the opposed roll. In the opposed roll, whomever comes closest to their success number without going past it wins the contest. For example, 2 characters wrestling for control of one sword could be required to make opposed strength checks to see who gets the weapon. The character with the highest d20 roll doesn't exceed his strength score wins this contest, right? So let's say both characters have a 15 strength. So the one that gets closest to 15th without going over gets the sword. Let's say they both roll a 16. All right. That means that they both were in excess of it and you have to re-roll. It takes another round to continue struggling for that sword. So the one that gets closest to their attribute without going over is the winner of this opposed contest. Blocking. A character can declare that she is using one of her attacks to block an opponent's strike. Blocking is a hard parry with a weapon that deflects an opponent's attack. An opponent except rope-like things such as nets, lassos, or slings can be used to block. When a character tries to block an attack, she makes a normal attack roll, AC 4. Her opponent makes a normal attack against her armor class. The strike is blocked if the character succeeds with a lower roll than her enemy succeeds with. If the attacker failed anyway, it's a miss, and no matter what the blocking character rolls. If the blocking character failed but her attacker succeeds, it's a hit despite the block attempt. All right, so kind of common sense thing here, right? It's again another opposed roll, and if you succeed and your opponent fails their attack, it doesn't really matter. If you succeed and they succeed, then you block their first attack, and then you still have your secondary attack as well. Called shot. Called shot is an attack at a specific location on the target. For example, a called shot can be used to attack the head of an enemy who isn't wearing a helmet, the armored legs of the character wearing only a breastplate, or special weakness of a monster with an Achilles heel. Called shots receive a +1 initiative penalty. All right, so you're going to lose some initiative because it takes longer to make that careful aim. Called shots normally present the attacker with a -4 penalty on his attack roll. All right, so that's a pretty steep. I did it again. That's a pretty steep penalty. But if you're going for something, it is much difficult to hit that very specific thing. I recall when they say, aim small, miss small. When you're aiming for a small target, oftentimes you will miss by just a little bit. And here we go. There we go. Sorry. Uh, Disarming. There are two types of disarming maneuvers, offensive and defensive, and they both work essentially the same way. A character who wishes to use either type of disarm must allocate one of his attacks for the round to the feat. If you disarm is a defensive one, it is resolved before the attacker rolls there to hit. All right. So you're going to declare that I am going to attempt a disarm, and then when so you're not getting your attack, you're just waiting for them to attack you to go for a disarm action. Then if you have additional attacks, you can counterattack. Pretty common sense stuff. Receives a 4-point bonus to target armor class. So anyone involved in a disarm that is using a two-handed weapon receives a 4-point bonus to the target armor class for the purposes of opposed roll. It is impossible to disarm a weapon 2 sizes larger than your own. So you're not going to be able to disarm somebody with a dagger if they're wielding a two-handed sword. I don't know why not, because you could, I guess, I guess you could do it like, look at the picture here. You see this dagger with its two prongs coming off of it? I mean, that is basically a dagger designed to entangle another weapon and potentially disarm it. So I don't see why that couldn't disarm a sword that's larger than this. I mean, here you see a fencing sword against like a rapier against what looks like a broadsword. So grabbing, overbearing, so that I'm going to skip over grabbing. Overbearing is best attack against a warrior of heroic prowess is often a simple rush. Overbearing is a common tactic when several creatures are confronting a lone enemy who can cut them to pieces one at a time. Overbearing attackers throw themselves at the opponent using whatever holds they can to get him to the ground and restraining him. All right, and we've seen this many, many times. The overbearing forces resolve the attack by making a single attack roll all at the THAC0 or their best member attacks gets a +1 bonus to his hit for additional attackers. The attack is made against the defender's natural armor AC 10 for most PCs, only counting magical and dexterity adjustments. A man in plate mail is just as vulnerable to being pulled down as a man in leather armor. All right, so yeah, the armor class from the armor doesn't really count. It's, base AC, and then any magic item, like if you're wearing +1 leather armor, that +1 is still going to apply, even though the leather armor doesn't. If the attacker hit, they must make an opposed strength check against the defender to see if they are drag him down. Use of strength of the largest attacker and apply the following modifiers. 4-point bonus or penalty per size difference of the largest attacker versus the defender. +1 per additional attacker. -4 if the defender has more than 2 legs. All right, so if the defender is if you're trying to tackle and grapple to the ground an owl bear, let's say, it has 4 legs, and so it is not going to be very easy to grapple down. Pull and trip. I mean, it's, we're starting to get to some of the minutia, like I was kind of saying, that becomes that becomes something you can kind of describe just based on the actions and everything. A lot of times, trips happen when the character fumbles. All right, that's almost the most common of fumbles. So if you're using like a fumble chart or a critical hit chart, you can very easily, if you rolled that one or rolled that natural 20, you can very easily put your opponent prone, or you can very easily trip over your own feet and end up tripping and falling and losing the combat round. But they have the additional kind of opposed rule here as well. Sap is an attempt to knock out an opponent by striking them with the flat of the blade or slung him from behind with a sturdy sword hilt. Slugging him behind. Uh, Sap is a typical for a cold shot. So on top of that, you have to add the cold shot to it as well. So that would be a -4 penalty. The penalty increases to -8 if the defender is wearing some kind of a helmet. Only small or medium creatures can be sapped. All right, large monsters can't be knocked out like this. All right, so good rule to remember. The shield punch is basically the shield bash. You're using an attack. You're going to be at -2 on your attack rolls, -4 penalty that round, and the shield punch attack is rolled with a -4 penalty. A character may use his reaction adjustment due to high dexterity score to offset these penalties. Alternatively, the character can substitute his normal attack for a shield punch with no penalties. All right. So if you exchange a attack roll for your shield punch, you'll avoid the penalties to attacking. Shield rush. Shield rushing is an attempt to knock someone down by running into them with your shield. The character must have 10 feet or 2 spaces of running room to make effective shield rush, making shield rushes treated as charge attack for the purposes of guarding characters with set spears. We go to special weapon maneuvers such as the trap, like I was mentioning, that dagger with the 3 prongs on it, or 2 prongs on it, plus the blade. So it's possible to trap a weapon or a shield to pin your enemy's weapon against his body, or to trap the weapon on your own sword hilt or weapon haft. This maneuver is known as the trap. The trap must Traps are much like blocks. The character can get a chance to trap attack that comes before his action phase by declaring the trap before initiative is rolled, or he can trap an attack that comes in his action phase or later without declaring this action beforehand. Like with the disarm, the trap is resolved before a normal attack roll is made. A character attempts to trap an enemy's attack by rolling the opposing attack roll versus AC 0, while his opponent rolls against AC 4. If the trapping character wins the opposed roll, the weapon is successfully pinned. Otherwise, the pin fails and the normal attack roll is made. All right, so that's what it seems like a lot of these opposed rules are doing. They're just assigning a different armor class target that either the attacker or the defender has to meet in order for these things to happen. Trap and break. Some weapons, such as a sai or a sword breaker, are suited for breaking a trapped enemy weapon. If you roll a d20, for metal weapons, this is a 7 or better on a d20. So the trapped character must roll a successful item save versus crushing blow for his weapon or it breaks. For metal weapons, this is a 7 or better on a d20. the weapon's magical bonus applies, right? So if you roll below a 7, your weapon is going to break. If the break attempt fails, the trapped blade is automatically freed. Otherwise, the weapon is broken. Only swords, knives, or weapons with sword-like components, such as halberds, spikes, or glaive, can be broken. Unarmed attack, throwing a punch or trying to wrestle hold a enemy is always legitimate attack as noted in chapter 1, and they go into further detail here. Unhorsing, so you can knock them, you can damage them, you can trip or pull them, you can overbear them, or you can damage the mount. All right, so I'm not going to go into greater detail there. Fighting styles. You have single weapon fighting styles. You have two-handed weapon. You have size and two-handed weapons. Calculations and discussions to take place here. You have one or two-handed weapons. Several weapons can be used one-handed or two-handed. That's usually like a bastard sword. If you have a certain strength, you can wield a bastard sword one-handed, or hand-and-a-half sword, sometimes it's called. One-handed weapons used two-handed. Usually it's a very simple thing. You just add one extra point of damage when doing it that way. Let's see what they're going to do here. They don't actually give you anything here for doing that. Weapon and shield, so your typical sword and board. I don't see any. There are two disadvantages to this style. First, the character is limited to using one single-handed weapon, since his other hand is a shield. Secondly, if he wants to quickly empty a hand, he has to drop his weapon. Most shields are strapped onto the character's arm and take a full round to remove. All right. Two weapon fighting. Usually the second hand, the offhand, suffers a -2. If the weapon is non-proficient, it's a -4. But you'll have fighting styles that will grant you two weapon, dual wielding fighting style, which will eliminate those negatives. Unarmed, I'm going to save that for later. Missile and thrown weapons, basic stuff here. Missile loaded weapons. There's a rule from, I believe, Unearthed Arcana in first edition, where if you have your arrow knocked and everything, you get to fire before initial. I can't stand that rule. It's like, because you're supposed to be knocked and just, almost drawn or partially drawn and just always ready to shoot. And I would say that really slows down your movement rate. I just don't like to do it. I don't like to give that option. I think it's too powerful of an optional rule coming out of the AD&D first edition Unearthed Arcana. Weapon specialization styles. Now this is where it gets kind of crazy, and I'm like, just way too nuanced here. Way too many layers of information. So dueling. I would never do this. I would never use this at all. Having to roll all of these different things, and, player option dueling plot, and, are you doing a high attack, a middle attack, a low attack? And, I mean, just looking at this makes me say, no, I'm not using this. It's just too much detail to do something that you can just narratively take care of based on not just whether or not you hit a target, but how much above your target number you made that hit. You can then allow the player to describe exactly how what they were looking to do. I was aiming high, and this is what I did. You as the GM or dungeon master, you look at how much damage was done, and you just do what makes sense, right? So you don't need this long, very complex thing here. Normal attack, shield punch, sap. I mean, just too much layers. attacking in the right spot, moving the figures, and I'm not going to get into that at all as far as that's going to choice of attack. You see, it keeps on just building up and building up and building up, and getting to the getting to the point where it just becomes too cumbersome to put in all of those different layers, especially as they were getting to the end. I mean, to try to remember all of that stuff, I think that it's far better to just, you know, just see how well the player character makes a roll, above what their target number is, and then let them describe, exactly what the attack looked like. If you want to add that extra flair to the action taking place. So, yeah, where I agree completely with their notion that a combat isn't just I'm standing here, I swing my sword, I hit or I missed. This is how much damage I do. A lot of what they're describing here is handled with critical role charts, where they have all these other mishaps. And if you wanted to do something along those lines, you can alter those critical role things, like take the instant death off of it, and then just say, well, you didn't roll a natural 20, but on a for your character, rolling in the three highest possibles, short of a 20, then you'll get one of these side effects that doesn't do additional damage, but might cause them to fall or trip or, simply push them back or something along those lines. If you wanted to modify the semi-critical hit chart, and have those extra little notes of flair to them, then I think that's a better way to go than to include all of this additional dice rolling and modifiers and all of that. That makes it much, much more complicated. So a player will be able to tell, well, my character with this particular weapon needs to needs a 15 to hit, and yet my character rolled a 27, and let's say, well, not a 27, but let's say a 22, but it was a dirty 22, right? It was a 19 plus 3, and they ended up with a 22. Well, now you could apply any of these other things there. Not only did you hit the character really, your opponent really well, but you pushed him off his feet. All right, that is something that you can do narratively, still giving the bonus for the much higher roll that was achieved without a critical, and you're adding that nuance in there without modifiers, without all this, this minutia of additional game rules to it. So that's something that I would certainly apply. I would, and it's something that's very, very easy to implement. My players roll, roll non-critical hits that are above 20, and it would be very, very simple for me to just say, hey, you know what? You did your damage, your normal damage and everything, but you also did this to your opponent as well. Maybe you disarmed them with that hit. I could do a hit location. I have a hit location die. I could roll that real quick to see where they hit them. Maybe you shifted their helmet to where it's lopsided now, and one of their eyes is covered. So now they'll be at a -2 for their next attack until they can, shake their head and adjust, adjust the helmet. Without it having to be a natural 20, just an exceptional hit, then I think you can incorporate all of these things by simply doing that. So I know this video is going a little bit long, but I pretty much covered the entire chapter. So, I hope you enjoyed this. I welcome your questions and comments. Remember, tomorrow night, I'm doing a live stream, and I'm going to be joined by Joe the lawyer, who is a much more affluent with AD&D second edition than I am. So I really welcome his input, and I hope he gets a chance to see this video before we actually sit down tomorrow night. And certainly welcome his comments and everything, either on this video or certainly tomorrow night. We can bring this topic up about some of these optional player rules, and love to hear how he implements these in any particular way. So thanks for joining. If you hadn't subscribed, please consider subscribing. Like the video, share the video. I've noticed that a lot of shares have been, on my videos have been really higher than normal. So I really appreciate that, because that's great for attracting even more people to the channel. And as always, your questions and comments are absolutely welcome. And I look forward to seeing you on a gaming screen sometime soon. Be sure to check out the live stream tomorrow night at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Myself, joined by Joe the lawyer, discussion on AD&D second edition. And for everyone out there, enjoy the rest of your day. Continue gaming and enjoying yourselves gaming. And let's just keep these discussions on some old school D&D and other role-playing games. Let's just keep those discussions rolling, and keep on bringing the new player, bringing their attention to some of these old systems, so that maybe they'll give them a chance, and a try, and they might find a lot of things that they either like this system better, or they might at least adopt some of the ideas from this and bring it back to their home games as well. So have a great day. Take care.